about the life that we recently had to abandon, it has to do with measurement. The dimensions of the average smartphone are about equal to the dimensions of the average coffee glass. Now, I found that out a couple of months ago when I got a Facebook friend request from the one girl who had made it the point of her entire school career, for the 5 years we were at school together in Liverpool, to hate my guts. Now, in fairness to her, this wasn't all that difficult. There was always going to be some kind of personality clash. She went through her school life determined to break as many rules as possible. In fact, the more she could break in one go, the better. I went through life desperately trying to keep all the rules, and the more I could keep at once, the better. In short, she was a career rebel, and I was a career nerd. So, as I say, the clash was inevitable. But right from the start, it was pretty memorable. You've no idea just how much mileage and vehemence one rather small girl can get out of the single one-syllable word, SWAT! I soon learned that if I tried to respond, anything I said would be thrown back at me in a sneering imitation of my Irish accent. One way or other, I was doomed to provide the entertainment. So I hit on a genius coping strategy. It was worthy of the finest Greek philosophers. I pretended she wasn't there. It worked just fine at the start. In fact, if I took it deeply enough, I could even pretend that I wasn't there, which was one of the strong points of the exercise. But even though my enemy was at least a head shorter than me, she wasn't built for ignoring. And the thing about the Greek philosophers is this: most of them founded schools, but there isn't much evidence that many of them actually had to attend one. My friend, or my enemy, found friends of her own. They were about 2 heads taller than both of us, and they were only too delighted to lend a hand, in more ways than one. It soon became part of my daily routine to be kicked and punched in lessons, to do class tests with the pens and on some occasions the paper being torn out of my hands and thrown across the classroom. And on at least 2 occasions, I was pushed so hard from behind on the school staircase that I had to grab the banister with both hands to save myself from falling. And through it all, I pretended it wasn't happening. She wasn't there. I wasn't there. And so it was until one particular day when I was standing alone in the line outside a classroom, waiting with the rest of them for our teacher to arrive. 2 girls called me over to look at something in a magazine. No sooner had I got there than they vanished, leaving nothing but the hint of a few sniggers on the air. And in their place, my enemy hurtled towards me almost out of nowhere. She shoved me so violently that I crashed backwards through the doorway behind me, flew through the air, and hit the back wall of a room I had never entered before. Now, there was a good reason why I hadn't entered the room before. It was, after all, a boys' toilet. My enemy spread-eagled herself across the doorway, shouting with triumph to keep me in for as long as possible. She was quickly joined, of course, by half the class. It was time to put the goody two-shoes in her place, or more precisely, in the case of the boys, their place. The entertainment was well planned, except for one thing that they hadn't prepared for. And that was the one thing they had never had the chance to see before: my reaction. You see, whatever about the Greek philosophers, as soon as I hit that wall, two things became crystal clear to me. The first was that, despite all the best efforts of philosophy, I was here. The second was that I was not going to remain here for much longer. And so it was that in approximately 20 frenzied seconds, 9 years of blameless conduct were blown, quite literally, out through the door. I got to my feet, hurled myself at the baying mob in the doorway, and tore at them with fist, foot, tooth, nail, and anything else that came in hand, until they broke ranks and ran for their lives. Now, they had just enough strategy left from the shock of it all to run in different directions. But there was only one I was interested in following. I chased the girl who had pushed me through the door down the corridor, cornered her against the wall, drew back my fist, and landed the most telling, devastating punch that was ever thrown in slow motion. You see, whether it was the intervening force of divine mercy, and there's something to be said for that, by the way, or just the fact that I still couldn't bring myself to get into trouble, but I couldn't take revenge any further than I had already taken it. In any case, it wasn't necessary, because even though I'd made a fool of myself, yet again, the moment had taught me a more powerful lesson about the strength and the powers of drama and storytelling than even the best English teachers could manage to do. Just the sight of me bearing down on everyone like an avenging angel, let alone the second-hand accounts that went around the place within the hour, were enough to ensure that I was never physically set on at school again. And so, years later, I retrieved my smartphone from the glass into which I had dropped it and nerved myself to accept the friend request from my former enemy. We had both been imperfect children. Now we were adults, and we had to move on with our lives. The Greek philosophers wouldn't have had it any other way. Besides, after all these years, I wanted to see what she had to say for herself. Well, she didn't apologise, and she didn't offer any reason. What she did do, however, was give me many details about her recent trip to Ireland, where she had travelled to reconnect with her roots. She'd found a peace and a connection in the experience that she had never known anywhere else. And she gave me a long list of all the places she'd visited. Not surprisingly, Cork was the highlight of the whole trip. If only she'd known then that it was where I lived. But no matter, because she'd soon be coming back. And when she did, we'd meet up and discuss the happy memories of the past over coffee in the English market.